Ecclesiastes chapter number 5. I can't remember if I've preached a message out of verses 1 and 2 or not, but we're not going to be reading those. It might have been a devotion. I was trying to rack my brain last night, trying to remember which one it was. But we're going to start reading today in verse number 3. Solomon writes, "For a dream cometh through the multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better it is that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thy hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also diverse vanities, but fear thou God." Now, a lot going on in these verses. We could hit on something different out of each one. But the theme, if you will, from verse number 1 and 2 talks about keeping thy foot when you go into the house of God. Right? To be aware that this isn't just another building. It's not, in their days, right, another temple. Okay, this is a place that has been consecrated to and set aside for God's use. Right? When you build a true church, well, I mean, we're the body of the church, but who's the head? Christ. It's His. We're just permitted to use it. It's our honor and privilege to maintain it. Right? Keeping thy foot, it means don't step lightly when you go into God's house. But in verse number 3, he starts talking about some of those people that go to God's house and they don't take mind of what their foot does, maybe what their hand does, but in this case, he's talking about what their mouth does. Okay, so in verse number 3, he says, "For a dream cometh through the multitude of business." Okay, now business there does not mean transactions. Like business, we would think between two businesses, right? Or on your job, you may have business to do. Okay, that's just talking about a flurry or activity in your life. He's saying that dreams, okay, he's not talking about goals. He's not talking about, milestones that you may have set in your life. What he's talking about are those three things that we can wrap up the definition of sin with: the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. He's saying those dreams, that in a multitude of business, in all of the chaos and all of the activity of our lives, he's saying out of that frantic, out of a sense of no solid foundation, if you're not on the solid rock, he's saying out of much business, out of much shifting of sands, you're going to find something that your eye desires, or that your heart desires, or that the pride of life doesn't want to give up. And out of that, that's what a dream is. Okay? It's something that's not real, because that's what a dream is. It's not real. But you're convinced, and you have a conviction in your heart that you're not going to let go of it. Out of a multitude of business come dreams. Something real, you don't have to do a whole lot of work to try and prove that it's real, or to try and hold on to, something that's real. You try and catch air, though, you're going to have a lot. Well, they can do that, and then they can get rid of it. That's called a vacuum chamber. Right, but that takes a whole lot more effort. I mean, if you want to go to chapter number 1, try and catch the wind. Okay, Solomon talks about it doesn't matter how much work you do under the sun, not going to be able to tell where the wind's coming from, where it's going, and you're certainly not going to be able to harness it. Okay? But then, the end of verse number 3, he says, "And a fool's voice is known by multitude of words." And he's saying dreams are something that happen from a multitude of business, and you can tell a fool, especially when a fool is holding on to a dream, because the fool tries to rationalize it with a multitude of words. If something's true, if something's simple, you can easily explain it. Okay, well, what is wood? It's a dead tree. I mean, really, that's what it is. Right? What is fur? Well, that's a dead animal's hide. Okay, things that are real are easy to explain. Then you go and take one of these college classes. Okay, What is humanism? That's not an easy answer because it's made up. And it's a belief system that somebody else has bought into. Well, a fool, whether their dream is tangible or not, whether it's godly or not, if it's something that a fool's come up with, they're going to be made known by their long explanations. They're trying to tell you why it's good and why it's good for them to have it. All the while, you know, one, I don't care. But two, you're trying to make yourself feel better, not make me feel better. Didn't James say that the tongue is an oddity because such a small thing can control the entire body? What you invest all the time in the flapping of your tongue, right? If that's always running and it's always talking about one thing that you're trying to rationalize, you make yourself known as a fool if it's something that everybody knows isn't worth holding on to. But with all that flapping, you're steering your path. You've been focused on this dream that isn't real, and you're trying to hold on to, and you're making yourself known by a multitude of words that nobody really wants to hear. Okay, in other words, the Bible says, be sure that your sins will find you out. You may not even realize you're doing it, but be sure that certainly God, and sometimes even man, will be able to tell if you're being foolish. Now it starts dealing with some of them dreams and the constant use of your tongue to justify or rationalize in relation to God, starting in verse number 4. When thou vowest to vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Well, what's the dream in verse number 4? Someone dreams or desires to have something of God or to do something for God, but what's it say? That they vow the vow and then they don't pay it. All that it was a multitude of words. Maybe they desired to receive the acclaim of man, or maybe they desired a gift from God in exchange. That's not how a vow works. A vow is, Lord, I'm going to do this, and that's it. I promise that I will do this. There is no exchange. This is not a layaway program where I want this, and then I'm going to promise to do this, and then after I get done fulfilling the promise, then no. And most of the time, the people that do a lot of talking about their vow are the ones that will never fulfill it. Because they don't want to fulfill the vow, or else they would be doing that. What do they want? They want people to know that they've made a vow to God. Well, what does verse number 5 tell us? Better it is that thou shouldest not vow than that thou should vow and not pay. Why? Because of what verse number 4 says. For he hath, talking about God, hath no pleasure in fools. Right? It's very important when we come to the house of God to certainly watch our step, which by extension means how we behave, how we conduct ourselves. It's also very important to keep in mind what we say either with our lips or with our heart. Much words are the sign of a fool. Much words in trying to rationalize oneself to God, or much words in trying to justify something that they've done before God, that's the sign of a fool. And thankfully God is long-suffering, but, verse number 4, for he hath no pleasure in fools. He may be long-suffering, but there's no pleasure from God when he looks at your life, when all that it is words. When it's, I will do, or I promise to, or Lord, I'm sorry, but really you're not sorry. Much words, there's no pleasure from God. What does God pleasure in? Well, what did Jesus say? If you love me, keep my commandments. How else can we aspire to do what Peter wrote and what the prophets wrote in the Old Testament, that God said to his people, be ye holy, for I am holy? Somebody show me the definition of holiness where it says that in order to be holy, there must be much words. In fact, most of the time, those that truly live godly, most of the time they don't have to say much. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter number 5 in the Sermon on the Mount? Let men see your good deeds, not hear your good words. And once they see your deeds, then they can glorify your Father in heaven. Words are intangible. dreams, which are the result of a multitude of business in your life, no sure-footedness, no solidarity, no conviction of what it is that you need to do, always busy about something, then you can develop a dream. Well, what's a dream? Something that you're going to have to use a lot of words to convince people of because it's not real. Now, certainly, it would be easy to stand here and say that, people that have never known God, all that they are is words and all that they are is dreams. Right? You can't fault them for that. They don't know any better. They don't know a different way. Until someone goes and lives a life before them that they can see their good deeds and then glorify God. That they can shine a light. That they can, salt that person's life with the things of God so that the mercy and the grace of God don't go, abandoned or unused, that person can be preserved, so to speak, long enough to get saved. All that's in Matthew chapter number 5. You're the light of the world, you're the salt of the earth. So, words, not that valuable. It doesn't say that words are bad. What's it say? A multitude of words. What did God answer Moses when Moses asked the burning bush? Who do I tell Israel that sent me? I am. Very short words. In fact, I dare say that if I could get through from Matthew chapter number 5 to the end of Matthew chapter number 7, how long did it take us to do a Sunday school lesson on the Sermon on the Mount? About 6 months, right? But if we were to just read what Jesus said, it'd be shorter than my Sunday school lesson today. Right? But there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of truth into those words that we endeavored to unpack. But Jesus didn't use a lot of words, even though we could take the few words that he said, and he meant a whole lot by it. And all that's apparent when the Spirit reveals unto you the Word of God. But God very seldom used a lot of words. What did he begin the law with Israel? Did he give them all, over 600 laws at once? No, he had 2 stone tablets, and he wrote with the very hand of God onto those tablets the first 10, what we call the 10 Commandments. And then Moses broke them, and then he had to redo them. But God himself wrote the first 10. He said, these first, and then as we get further along, more will be delivered. More will be given. He didn't give Noah real big long list of blueprints on how to build the ark. In fact, you can find those instructions in under a chapter. He told him what wood to make it out of. He told him how long. He told him how wide. And he said, oh, by the way, it's going to rain, so build the ark. And then we never find that God spoke to Moses or Noah ever again. One time was good enough because there wasn't a multitude of words. Jesus, when he's hanging on the cross, did he make a great, big, long prayer for those that had crucified him? He said, no, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. In what we would call the model prayer, but a lot of people call the Lord's Prayer, it wasn't a prayer, it was an example. Not a very long thing. Why? Because he covered everything that he needed to. Every part of the model prayer, which is hanging up over there outside of the water fountain, if you were to read that, each one of those, you take one word out, doesn't mean the same. You add one more, you're taking away from it. You're diminishing it. That's the exact thing that Christ needed to say. So that's what wisdom, that's our desire, isn't it, to be Christ-like. Not too many words, not too little words. Okay? What's a fool doing it? How can he tell when somebody's talking about a pipe dream and they're not talking about something that's tangible, that they actually can achieve, that it's been planted in their heart? Lots of words. Why do you think politicians talk so much? Because they don't intend on following through on half of the things that they promised. If you don't believe me, see me after church. I'll talk to you about the Model Cities program in a place called Detroit. In 1950, Detroit had the highest per capita income in the United States per household. Now, half of the city is overrun with dogs. And there's farms in the middle of subdivisions because the houses, burnt down, were torn down, and now there's just a field, and it's cheaper to grow your own food in the middle of the city than it is to go down and go to the grocery store. Way to go, Democrats. Anyway. Not going to get started on all that. But much words. You can tell when somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes. So if we can tell that, how much more does God have no pleasure in a fool? When it comes to making vows. When it comes to making a vow but knowing full well that you're not going to fulfill it. Or that you may intend to, but you didn't really think it out. It was much words, but very little thought. Very little conviction behind it. It sounded good, so you said it. But then, look at verse number 6. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy thy works, or destroy the work of thine hands? For in a multitude of dreams and many words there are also diverse vanities. Now keep in mind, this is the Old Testament. Christ had not come yet. The Old Testament version of what we would call Christ, every time you see the angel of the Lord. Okay? So you can find Jesus in the Old Testament. He wrestled with Jacob, touched the hollow of his hip. He walked different ever after that encounter with the Lord. Right? He met Moses in the burning bush and in the pillar of cloud and pillar of fire that went before him. Okay, well, you can find him in the Old Testament, but then there are also angels, the messengers of God. Then, in the New Testament, we find that angels refers to pastors. Revelation, right into the 7 angels of the 7 churches in Asia. Talking about, what is an angel? The mouthpiece of God. The angel of the Lord, that's different, because it's an angel, but it's of the Lord. Every other time it's a messenger from God, it's the mouthpiece of God. In the New Testament, the angel is the one that God put there to preach to you the truth. So, it's not an angel's job to listen to us. Angels listen to God. It's not an angel's job to receive many words from God's people. So, let's look at verse number 6. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. We'll get to that here in a minute. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. The angel, if he's an angel, will tell you the exact same thing that these verses say. Will tell you to be careful what it is that you say before God. To tell you to be humble when you come to the house of God. That you should have an air of not only humility, but also of meekness. Right? Don't just be slow to anger. Okay? Don't just be, someone that strives not to be emotional. Be someone that's slow to words. Think before you say, is what they used to tell me when I was a kid. And sometimes I still don't do that. But when I do think about what I'm going to say, most of the time I'm a lot more appreciative, or I'm a lot more proud of what it is that I had to say, because I know some of the things that I've said when I wasn't thinking. But he's saying, don't go to the messenger of God and say that it was an accident, it was an error. I didn't mean to say what it was that I meant to say. Right, because the messenger, the angel, he's talking about the one that comes to deliver God's reward for our many words and our very few actions. In the Old Testament, when God sent something to somebody, he either used a prophet or he used an angel. Anybody remember what happened with the final plague over there in Egypt? The Lord sent the angel of death. Okay? Many times, he doesn't send an angel to deliver a message. He sends them to do something also. They are the agents of his judgment in the Old Testament. Amen. Anybody remember who went down to get Lot and his family out? They weren't there to deliver a message. They were there to get Lot and then take him out. Because God said, I'm going to destroy. You go down and you get them. Sometimes the angel is not the messenger. Sometimes the angel is there to tell you or to do what God told them to do. And sometimes we don't like it. Lot lost everything that he had. And he had a whole lot. You don't believe me? He sold off all the great herds that he had. His herds rivaled Abraham's. And he used all of those prophets to probably have a very nice place down there in Sodom and Gomorrah in the cities of the plain. Well, how do you know that? Because he had a very good position. He was the man that stood in the gate. He was a judge in those cities. He lost all of it when those angels showed up. That was part of what they were there to say. You made your bed. You chose to sleep here. Thankfully, God's going to pull you out. But little do you know, you're going to lose a lot of your children. You're going to lose a lot of your son-in-laws or your daughter-in-laws. You're going to lose everything that you had. And oh, by the way, by the time this is all done, your wife's going to be a pillar of salt. We'll save you, but because of your many words, because of your many dreams, because of the multitude of business in your life, you came up with a dream and you tried to justify that dream with many words, and this is the result. You can't explain to an angel that it was an error. God knows all. He doesn't suffer fools, and he doesn't take pleasure in a fool. He knew that you knew what you were saying. He wrote it down. He penned down this section to warn us, to let us know, be careful what you say to God. Not just with your mouth, but be careful what you say to God with your actions. Because if you're spending all that time talking about it, you're certainly going to live to try and make sure that those things come true. Out of the mouth comes the utterances or the desires of the heart. What's in here works its way out. And your words may sound like, I want to do what God wants me to do. Or I want to live the way that God wants me to live. But if you're spending all your time trying to convince people that what you're doing is for God, obviously the proof's not there in the pudding, or else you wouldn't have to do all the talking. Well, what does verse number 7 say? In the multitude of dreams and many words, there are also diverse vanities. Meaning diverse emptiness, valuelessness. That we think it's worth something, knowing the entire time that it's empty. What's a dream? Well, it'd be nice to have, but we know we're probably not going to get it. What's a multitude of words trying to make that dream more of a reality than it was before I started talking? What is it? It's diverse vanities. If you've got to spend all of your time explain. Last night, I made a whole lot of different points when that guy asked me, why the KJV? But each one was its own answer. I didn't want to leave any bases uncovered. If I had covered everything, I'd still be there, and I'd be there for about another 2 years to explain to him why the KJV is the only thing that I'd ever use. By the grace of God, unless I lose my mind and, you find me out in the middle of a cow pasture like Balaam eating, grass one day. Okay? Outside of that. But why did it? It wasn't, I spent a whole long time explaining one thing. Each one was my own point. And I tried to give him as many points because he really wanted to know. That's not much words. That's a word fitly spoken. Much words is, they didn't ask you, but you're still going to tell them. You ever meet somebody, hey, how you doing? And then it's one question. Somebody asked me during a handshake, no offense to you guys. If I had a problem, I'd let you guys know about it. But, if I had a bad day throughout the week, I don't have to tell you about it. In fact, it's very seldom, and most of the time it's sarcastic when I do, give one of these, that aren't. But most of the time you ask me, hey, how you doing? Good, how are you? Because I don't mean to offend you. I'm not here to see you. And I do wish that you have a good week. I do care that you're doing. If you got a problem, let me know. I'll do, if I can do something, I'll try and fix it. But if you've got to tell me every detail about your week, I don't know why you're using all those words. Because I didn't ask you what it is that you're telling me right now. But why are some people like they're seeking approval? They want to know that their dream that they've found in this multitude of business, they want to know that dream, they want to hear from somebody else that, hey, that's a good dream to have. They want to hear from somebody else. Well, it sounds like you're getting closer. They use much words because they're not looking for the approval of God. They're looking for the approval of themselves and the approval of others. Who's interested in words? Man. Who's interested in what we do? God. What's in the pudding? That if we say, God expects us to do. So look with me back at the beginning of verse number 6. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Bible makes it clear. We know what we're doing. But that phrase, suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Okay, the title, before I forget it, Brother Randy, is the sin of the mouth. But what's that mean? Your flesh can be doing nothing. You can be sitting there. You can have, no temptation, no thoughts that are contrary. But you can say something, and even without doing anything, you've just committed a sin. Just because of the words. You don't believe me? Anybody ever lie? Bingo. Prime example. Why do you think God included that one in the first 10? Because it is pretty important. Because we're all apt to, whether or not it's a lie, whether or not it's making a promise that we don't fulfill. Okay, the Bible does say we are commanded to fulfill our promises, to deal, truthfully and honestly with others. That we don't bear false witness, in other words. Why are all those things so important to God? Because with your mouth, you can do a whole lot of damage. You can do certain types of damage with your mouth that you could never do with the flesh. Anybody ever hear the phrase? I know it's been sung by a bunch of different people, but the first cut's the deepest. Where's that usually come from? The mouth. If you're coming at me with a knife, you're not going to catch me off guard. I can see the knife. But it's the one that's in the back. It's that first cut that goes the deepest because we weren't expecting it. We weren't prepared for it. Where's that come from? Most of the time, the mouth. Amen. Because the mouth can do a whole lot of things that the flesh cannot do. How did the Pharisees stir up all these people against Jesus? Not with deeds. They tried to go and find proof and evidence on him all the time. They even invented charges and brought false witnesses, but they couldn't even get their stories together. What did they do? They stirred up the people. What did Brother Lawrence preach about on Wednesday about Paul? There were some people in Thessalonica that were upset, and when Paul went to a different city, they followed him and stirred up the people. They told lies. They brought false accusations. And what did Paul say? That, there's no proof to it. But what was their dream? That Paul in his new doctrine, which wasn't new, it's the same doctrine that was preached from the beginning, would leave. So they used much words to make those dreams come true. Verse number 7 says, for in the multitude of dreams and many words, there's emptiness or vanity. But what's it say after that? Fear thou God. You want to know someone that perpetually commits the sin of the mouth? Or a Christian that all the time claims to be Christian, but they're one of the reasons that people assume that anytime you hear the word Baptist or you hear the word Christian, most of the time what do they say? I knew one of them once, they were a hypocrite. Why do people just assume that? Because there have been a whole bunch of them. Why? Sin of the mouth. They caused their mouth, or they allowed their mouth to cause their flesh to sin. There's somebody that didn't fear God. Isn't that what verse number 7 ends with? But fear thou God. He's saying, in order to do everything that I've just discussed before this, you have to have a lack of the fear of God. Because if you feared God, you'd treat his house the proper way. In verse number 1. when thou enterest the house of God. Keep thy foot. Then verse number 3. You won't be concerned about dreams if you fear God, because you know that God is exceeding and abundantly able to do more than we could even ask or think. There are dreams or there are desires that are too great for me to even understand that God's able to give. But that's not why I serve God. I'm not worried about dreams if I fear God, because I'm worried about living right before God. Tomorrow doesn't matter if you fear God. Certainly, if a bill's due tomorrow, don't think, well, I'm never going to have to pay it. What does the Bible say? It says that a lot of people were saying that tomorrow we'll go down and we'll do business in this city and that city and this city. But what we should say is that if the Lord will, tomorrow we'll go down to this city. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I will be prepared to continue on with life should the sun come up tomorrow. But what I should be concerned about is today. Because if I fear God, I know that God allowed me to have today for a reason. He didn't have to give me the number that is on my head that I have, but I know that it's at least today's number, because I'm still here. I at least get part of it to teach Sunday school. I should be concerned about what I'm doing now, not in a multitude of words concerned about tomorrow. If I fear God, I care about what I do today, because I know today may be my last day. That I will be accountable, not just for the words that I said, but also for what I did. Then we get down to verse number 5. You won't make a vow to God knowing that you don't intend to keep it if you fear God. Because you understand that not only does God not have pleasure, in verse number 4, in a fool, God also doesn't show mercy to those that ignorantly and willfully, that don't do it ignorantly, but willfully do things that God doesn't approve of. He may give you a space of grace to get it made right, but that doesn't mean that his judgment will never come. If I fear God, I know there will be judgment, either in this life or when I stand before him at one of those thrones. That even if I don't receive judgment, that my many words and lack of action, that my lack of living a Christian life instead of talking about, or instead of having a multitude of words with a multitude of dreams and a multitude of business, instead of all that, if you fear God, you'll do. If you make a vow to God, it's because you truly believe that that's what you ought to do and that's God's will for you to do. And if you believe both of them things, you're going to do it. But if you don't think that God's listening, if you're saying for others to hear and not for God, that's no excuse when you stand before God. But you're not going to do it. All you wanted was the words to be said and no action to ever be done. Verse number 6. You won't suffer your mouth to cause the body to sin or the flesh to sin if you fear God. A just man, a wise man, doesn't just think before he talks. What does a wise man do? A wise man lives knowing that God is always watching. A wise man lives, and a just man will live, whether it's Job or in the New Testament, from the beginning, which is Job's the oldest book written, not the beginning is in the garden. But from the oldest book to the newest book, what do you find? That not only is God watching, but God, in the New Testament, He sealed me. He's inside of me. He's everywhere that I go. Not only does He see what I do, He's there when I do it. If you fear God, your actions will be different because you know that I am associated with God. And by association, if I do something that the world can find criticism in, they can find criticism in God. He's altogether lovely. He's above reproach. The psalmist said, taste and see that the Lord is good. But now I'm associated with God. I can defame the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. I can tarnish the view of others that they have for Him by what I do. Why do you think Paul wrote to abstain from the appearance of all evil? If I fear God, I may want to say some things, but I'm not going to suffer my mouth to cause my flesh to sin. I can shut up, believe it or not. Right? When do I do that? Usually when there's something that I shouldn't say, or when I know I'm supposed to be listening. Right? I do know how to stop talking. So what does verse number 6, suffer not thy mouth? There are times that it just wants to keep going. But sometimes I don't feel like talking. Sometimes I know that I shouldn't say more. Sometimes I'm waiting to hear a response before I know how I should continue. But if I just keep going, eventually I'm going to say something. If I listen to railing accusations from other people, if I knee-jerk reaction go out to defend myself, most of the time I'm not going to be quoting scripture to them. What am I going to say? Well, like that's any different from what you do, and then we're down that road. I can take criticism if I'm in the right mindset. Suffer not thy mouth to get the jump on the gun and say something before you can properly process it, before you blow your testimony. He's saying the mouth is not stronger than you, but sometimes we allow it to be. Then when we get to verse number 7, he says, for in the multitude of dreams and many words. He's saying both of them. Words aren't tangible, just like dreams. He says the multitude of dreams, you could dream all you want to, it's not going to happen. Even if it's something that is attainable, or you could accomplish it, all the dream is a dream. It's a shadow. Right? It's hand puppets on the wall. You can see something, but you can't touch it. And once that battery runs out in the flashlight, it's gone. That's all that a dream is. But what's all that? What are words? Words are the dreams of action. I say what it is that I intend to do or what it is that I desire to do, but until I do it, it's just a word. Take words to the bank. Used to, somebody's word meant something. But even back then, the word was not what the value was in. It was in the conviction and the determination of the person that gave you their word to do what it is that they promised to do. Words have no value. Dreams have no value. But yet the world and your flesh will try to tell you that if you talk enough, or if you can find the right way to spend it, if you could just get them to see like you see, then they would understand. Well, maybe they can't see like you see because you're fixated on something that's not real, a dream. And all of your words are talking about something that it's never going to happen. Or it could happen, but it's certainly not going to happen if you just stay there, sit there, just keep talking about it. Right? You want to know why I know that our pastor doesn't have a problem with Corvettes, even though he likes Corvettes? Because he doesn't talk about it 24/7. Every day, he's not out there looking for deals on Corvettes. Why? Because it's something that he likes, but it's not the desire of his heart. When a dream becomes the desire of your heart, that's when you get in trouble. Again, we return to fear God. If you fear God, you may have preferences. For instance, I prefer Skyline to Gold Star. But if God arranges it to where somebody wants to go out to eat and they pick Gold Star, it's not going to shatter my world to go to Gold Star. Right? I've done it before. I could do it again. I actually do prefer the fact that Gold Star, used to, they were the only place I could get Diet Mountain Dew, but now I can get Diet Mountain Dew at Skyline too. So everything's okay. But it wasn't that big of a problem before. I'd get it in the drive-thru and take it home. There's Diet Mountain Dew there. What am I saying? A preference is one thing, but a dream is something that you wish to make real. A preference is something that I'm okay without. It doesn't bother me if I don't have it. That's just what I prefer. But I don't have to have it. If God is the desire of my heart, and if I fear God, I understand that preferences That's just me having a personality. But when something becomes so rooted into my heart that I wish to make it so all the time, that's when something can become an idol, or something else can take the place of God in my heart. That's when something else will get more of my attention and I commit iniquity against God. What Solomon's saying is, whatever's in here, whatever the desire of your heart is, that's what you're going to talk about. That's what you're going to try and manifest. That's what you're going to try and make a reality. But he's saying, even if you do, if your last name was Rockefeller and you saw a can of oil one time and you wanted to build one of the biggest things, where's John D. Rockefeller now? In the ground. It was a dream, and he had it, and he manifested it. But, back to verse number 7, in a multitude of dreams and in many words are diverse vanities. It was all empty in the end. He built it, but he couldn't fill it with anything. Yeah, the Carnegies have a concert hall named after him now. And one of their descendants probably still has a whole lot of money. But what did it do for them? Those sounding brass and tinkling cymbals. They may have enjoyed it for a while, but it was empty. Couldn't take anything with it. Couldn't fill it with anything that was worth anything. Why? Because once it was done, you had to get another dream to replace the one that you just fulfilled. And then another one. And then another one. But just fear God, and you can always have the same dream or desire. What's that? I want to get close to Him as I can possibly get. I want to get so close to Him that He starts rubbing off on me. That's your desire. You'll fear God. You'll have a reverence for Him. But you can also have a relationship with Him. If that's the desire, your mouth won't cause your flesh to sin. But when you're trying to bottle up around certain people what it is that's in your heart, chances are there's some checking up to do. When you've got to restrain yourself from talking about certain things around other people because you know that they either wouldn't approve of it, or you know that what it is that you're desiring isn't in line with the will of God, as God trying to tell you, suffer not your mouth to cause your flesh to sin. Get it made right with God. Get your heart made right. You won't have to worry about that no more. Right? Because the sin of the mouth is, in truth, the sin of the heart. And the sin of the heart is, my heart is not right with God.